Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live for this week. I am Marta Nielsen with Utah State University Extension, and I am so excited to introduce to you Roslynn Brain McCann. She is our Sustainable Communities Extension Specialist based in Moab, Utah. Roslynn, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on this exciting Earth Day month.
Yes, and you are not in Moab right now. Tell us where you are.
I'm currently traveling around the United States doing a qualitative research study on regenerative design.
Okay. Okay, so you are just a woman about town.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about what you do with Extension.
Sure. I have a really fun role. My role statement essentially involves helping Utahns improve their environmental footprint. And as I've gone on over the years as a specialist, that's actually expanded beyond Utah. Some of my programs now have a national reach, but they are all focused on environmental sustainability with the added benefits of social and economic sustainability as well.
Okay. So you mentioned Earth Day. That's kind of why we're talking about sustainability here on our Facebook Live today. What day is Earth Day?
It is April 22nd.
April 22nd. So we've got a little bit of time before Earth Day, and we can kind of turn our thoughts towards being more sustainable and making sustainable choices. But sometimes it can feel really daunting. How do we overcome those feelings of being totally overwhelmed by the idea of changing our behavior?
I think the first involves perspective. So often, and this is not just the fault of people at large, it's also the fault of sustainability educators not knowing how to communicate messaging in a way that will get people excited or on board with sustainable behaviors. But many people view sustainability as loss. So I need to take shorter showers, I need to give up my car, I need to not do this and that. And if you're looking at it as a sacrifice, you're way less likely to engage in it, as opposed to all the benefits that you can reap engaging in sustainable behaviors. So for any of you looking to engage in sustainability, this is a great month, first of all, because we do have Earth Day this month, but also it is something that can benefit your personal life, your social life, your economic budget, and also the environment, of course, which is, I always say the environment is our most important underlying circle when you look at those three pillars of sustainability of environment, social, economic, because without clean air, clean water, without adequate food and healthy food to eat, without land to grow that food, and some form of energy, then we can't survive as a species. So it doesn't matter how healthy our social and economic systems are.
Right. And, I kind of think of it the same way I think of Thanksgiving. Like, we should be living sustainably all year long. We should be grateful all year long, like with Thanksgiving. But I feel like this month we have this opportunity to kind of refocus and think of ways we could do better. Kind of like reset for the year of what can we do to live more sustainably.
Exactly. And I think that it's really important to sit down, take a minute, and think through your daily routine. So think through when you wake up in the morning, what is your thought process? Let's just take it down to those basics. Are you more thinking, oh gosh, I need to go to work, I need to do this and that, negative thoughts, or I don't look very good today, etc., or resetting your mind, which is something very easy to do, but it takes a little bit to change the habit of the way your thoughts work, to a thought of gratitude. So looking out the window and being thankful for the sun rising or how beautiful it looks as the trees are coming into bloom, and really switching from a negative thought cycle to a positive one. And then beyond your first thoughts of waking up, then taking it to when I eat my breakfast, do I understand the ingredients of the food I'm consuming? Do I know where that food has come from? And also, how do I get to work? Is that mode of transportation stressing me out? Am I alone? Am I being very high-strung in that situation? Is there something I can do to change that mode of transit? What's my work environment like? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy for productivity, but also mental well-being? And then the same goes for lunch and dinner. Where is that food coming from? And then in the evening as well, how are you spending your evening? Is that really in behaviors that are helping you, or that are inhibiting your health and also the environment. You know, a lot of times those go hand in hand. When it's a harmful behavior for your health, it's also harming the environment, vice versa, because we are part of the ecosystem, and many people don't understand that. And so we play a very critical role, and we can play a really beautiful role in regenerating our environment that we are part of.
Right. It's not just preserving the environment for, you know, native species and plants and animals, but for us as part of that as well.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I love how you mentioned gratitude and the role that plays in sustainable choices. You mentioned that the environment is that kind of underlying pillar, but I love the idea of gratitude playing into that. Like it reminds me of the word stewardship. Like we love the beauty of this earth, and so we want to protect it and preserve it. I just love that idea of gratitude.
Yeah, because if you are thankful for something and you then become more strongly connected to that thing, you're starting to observe things more. Like if you explain gratitude for the sunset or sunrise, for example, when you wake up in the morning, then you're observing that more closely. You develop more of a connection with that, and then you're more likely to want to protect things like the view you have of your sunset or the natural environment surrounding that. And so gratitude can really serve as a foundation, a first foot in the door when it comes to living a sustainable lifestyle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you kind of walked through a daily routine and different ways we can think about things a little differently as we go about our day. Let's kind of dive into some of those. Should we start with food? Do you want to start with food?
Sure, I love good food, so that's a great starting point.
We all love food, right? And, you know, it's something we do for pleasure, not just for sustenance.
Yeah, and you know, I think that I should explain food and all of these different aspects of sustainability in what I do instead of what people should do, because I know what works for my own lifestyle, and hopefully that will expand out for others as well. So the first thing I suggest for people, you know, often I forgot my reusable bags. You know, I want to bring them, I have them, I just always forget to bring them. And so one suggestion I always make is when you write out your grocery list, if people are still doing that these days, you know, a lot of people are putting that on their phones, but when you're getting your materials for going to the grocery store together, put that in the reusable bags and grab some mason jars as well for bulk bins. And if you have a reusable produce bag, put that in there as well. And then put all of that in your car, or if you're a biker, then put that in your bike panniers in advance. So you have your bags, they're ready to go. Whether or not you're going to the grocery store right away, just when it's on your mind, have it already put in your car so it's ready, and at least that's taken care of. And then, of course, there's the importance of local food, and one of the extension programs I run is called Utah Farm Chef Fork. So it's to connect local, generally smaller scale farmers with chefs across the state. And I know the importance of the local food movement, having been raised in an agricultural area. But I wrote a fact sheet a couple of years ago about the local food movement in Utah. And just want to read you one important quote this is from a USDA report. So eating locally is correlated with improved nutrition, increased likelihood of making healthier food choices, obesity prevention, and reduced risk of diet-related chronic disease. So this is mainly because the food is more nutritious, fresher, and less processed than average food you would buy at the grocery store. And then many people are worried about finances. Well, I can't afford to buy food at the farmer's market, for example. Our state offers a really amazing program called Double Up Food Bucks. And so a lot of farmers markets are now taking that on, where when you go to the farmer's market and you purchase products, you can get double the amount for the food dollars that you have to spend with your SNAP card. So it really makes it very accessible for people of all income levels to consume locally.
Okay, so that's through the SNAP Ed program. So
right.
That's for lower income individuals. You have to qualify for that. But we do a lot of programming with SNAP Ed here at Extension. We do classes and a lot with the farmers markets as well. So I love that idea of trying to buy local food when you can. But you mentioned taking taking things to the grocery store to kind of rethink what you're purchasing, like the idea of taking your own containers and your own bags. Because a lot of stores now have bulk bins where you can get your food there instead of the box that has a bag inside and plastic on the outside and so much wrapping for our food.
Yeah. A lot of packaging. It's a major problem in our country. And one thing that you can do in any grocery store is bring your mason jars to, you'll of course know the weight of all of the same size by just weighing one, but bring it to the cashier and ask them for what's called a tare weight, T-A-R-E. And they'll put that on and weigh it and tell you how much that jar weighs by itself. And then you'll just write that down either in a marker on the jar or on a piece of paper. And then when you get to, you fill it up in the bulk area, check out, then they subtract that weight of the jar. So you're not paying for the jar as part of that purchase, and it will reduce the cost even more.
So you have to do that before you fill it up.
Yeah, definitely weigh the jars before you fill it up. And they can guess probably how much the jar weighs after, but it's always good to get an accurate reading.
Right, especially if cost is something you're concerned about. You want to make sure that it's still affordable for you to make these more sustainable choices. Mm-hmm,
exactly. And there's something super easy that you can do when it comes to sustainable living and food, and it's something that I carry with me everywhere I go. In fact, I wasn't even prepared to have to do this, but I'll show you since I have it in my purse, and it's not a very big purse, but I have this bamboo cutlery set, and I take it everywhere I go. It's got 2 chopsticks, a knife, spoon, and a fork, and it's made of bamboo, which is more resistant to bacteria. And I never have to use plastic cutlery when I go to eat somewhere. And so I always tell them, I have my own cutlery. Don't worry about giving me any of that.
I love
and
that.
Another thing that I carry with me as well is this one. This is a stainless steel straw that results in me never having to use plastic straws, which are a major problem for our ocean life. As you know, there's a video about 2 years ago or so that went viral of a sea turtle with a plastic straw stuck in its nose, and it really created this public outroar across the globe, and now there's even stronger movements to get away from plastic, and stainless steel straws are a great inexpensive way to do that.
Right. The thing I have a hard time with is oftentimes they'll give me a straw without, I haven't even asked for it.
Exactly.
And then I wonder, okay, or they'll put it on the table with my cup of water that doesn't have a lid or anything. Like, there's no reason I would need a straw. And then I wonder, okay, are they going to reuse that straw now that it's, potentially someone has touched it or whatever, or does that end up in the landfill anyway, whether or not I've used it? So that's hard. I think we have some cultural catching up to do in our restaurant culture with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good point, because when it comes to sustainable behaviors, we're working in a system that is used to wasting. It's our broader societal system, and many people are wanting to get away from that. But the reality is that many of our restaurants, our corporations, are very used to the general way they've been doing things. And so it can be difficult sometimes, at a restaurant. And I've experienced this as a mom. I have a toddler, and at the restaurant, without asking, they'll bring me a plastic glass for my toddler with a lid and a straw, and it breaks my heart when that happens. I'm starting to get in the habit now of realizing this might happen and just saying, as soon as we get there, he doesn't need a toddler cup. He can drink out of a regular glass. He's 2.5, but he does really well drinking out of regular dishware. And so that's, telling them at the onset, it's just a matter of remembering to have to do that. And the odd time we forget, we need to be forgiving of ourselves, because step by step, we're helping to change the system, but there's going to be times where, it just happens.
They'll bring you the straw whether or not you ask for it. Yeah. Yeah, and I have little kids too, and even, my little guy is almost 4, and he's still, I feel like every time I give him a cup without a lid, and not water. He never spills the water. It's always when it's like milk or something that's going to be sticky. But as you were talking about that, I thought, well, if you can bring your own cutlery, I could bring a cup with a lid for my young children to use, and you could there are simple things you could do to kind of get around that,
exactly.
Even when you're not at home.
Yep. And so, we've been talking about all these different things we can do when it comes to food. And what I want to emphasize is that there's a lot to be gained in these experiences, going back to that gain versus loss. So if you start shopping at the farmer's market, I don't know about you, but when I go into a big grocery store, I don't usually leave relaxed and revitalized after shopping in that store. But I do after I shop at a smaller food co-op, especially when I shop at the farmer's market. You talk to those growers, you have a great social experience. So you're getting all of these great health experiences by the social interactions. And then in addition to that, with the double up food bucks and buying in bulk at different stores that's available at, you're actually saving money. So if you do a cross comparison, I can almost guarantee the bulk items are going to be cheaper than purchasing packaged goods from the store.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had never thought about how I feel after those different shopping experiences, and you're totally right. The shopping at a farmer's market is not like a chore. It's an enjoyable experience.
Exactly.
It's totally different. I wish we had that all year, but we're almost to farmers market season. I think
we are.
The smaller ones, we have a farmers market at our Kaysville Botanical Center, but it doesn't open until a little bit later in the year. But some of the bigger markets open up, I think, in the next month or two. So we're getting there.
Yeah, and Salt has at least one year-round farmers market as well. So
that's true.
Hopefully we'll see more of those coming up in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the bulk bin idea. I actually saw an idea recently for a waste-free Easter using bulk candy, and I thought that was such a good idea because I think about the plastic eggs, and then if the candy inside is wrapped, and then the package that the candy came in. They're just so many of these things that we don't even think about. We're not conscious about
exactly
the impact of these traditions that we have. So let's kind of move on from food. What about things that we can, should we do transportation next?
It's something that most of us engage in every day. And what you're highlighting, Marta, you talked about food and now transportation. Food, transport, and energy are the big three hitters when it comes to reducing our environmental footprint. And so that's why I'm emphasizing these facts. So we talked some about food. Another big elephant in the room with food is meat consumption. So if you can actually start to view meat as a side dish to your dinner as opposed to the main feature, and also maybe even going as far as having one meatless day a week and changing up your meat sources to ones that have a lower carbon footprint associated with them. So that means the amount of carbon that has been used to produce that product. And there's also a thing called a water footprint, the amount of water that's gone into the production of that product. So that's something else to think about with food. And so with transport, it's something that, like I said, we do every day. And I bike to work every day when I'm back in Moab. And what's amazing about that for me is I connect more with my environment. I see that as sometimes it's my only workout that I have time for in a day is that bike commute that I engage in. And I arrive at work more mentally ready and prepared for the day, more relaxed. And I also am able to travel on a bike path from my home to Utah State University Moab without any traffic. I go right along a river on a bike path the entire time and pop out at the university. And so it's just a beautiful ride. I actually am way more stressed, and it takes equally as long. I've timed it to drive my car from my neighborhood. Which I live in a walking, biking only community. So if I drive my car, I have to walk out to where my car is parked at the public carport area for our neighborhood, and then drive from there to the university. Whereas opposed, I can just get right on my bike at my house and bike on the bike path all the way to campus, and it's really quick. It's just as fast as driving. Right,
and I'm going to admit something here. I did not go to Utah State, which is kind of a big deal when you work at Extension. I actually went to the University of Utah, and I had really great public transportation options available to me while I was a student. So I lived in Murray. There were 2 track stops there, and I could go right up to campus. It was included with my tuition. It was very easy and convenient for me to do that, and I did it almost every day for 4 years. But I remember during that time I was working downtown, and one of my coworkers, I was trying to convert her to the ways of public transit, and she lived, I think she lived in the Holiday area, and she was pretty far. She was probably equally far from the Trax line as she was from downtown, equally further east, and it just was not. And now that's changed. There's, this was a long time ago, but sometimes it's easier. Sometimes there are bike paths that take us right to work, or train lines or bus lines. I feel like at different times in your life or different places you live, sometimes that will be easier and sometimes it's more difficult.
That's exactly true. Yeah, so for me in Moab, it's flat relatively, and I have a bike path, like you're saying, right along Mill Creek all the way to campus. But if I was in Logan, which I used to live in Logan, it was a barrier to bike up the hill for me. I would do it sometimes, but the benefit of Logan is they have free public transit, so I took the bus way more often because I didn't want to have to buy a parking pass. And I used to, when I was a student, make the mistake of also being the person driving around the parking lot looking for a parking spot, and it's stressful. All of a sudden you're really close to being late for your class, and if I take the bus, I don't have to worry about any of that. So I used to do that in Logan. There's lots of public transit options. There's carpool programs now. Utah State University has a great one called Zim Ride, where you can carpool anywhere in the state, and you just have to have a student ID to join Zim Ride. It's a free program for us as part of Utah State, and so there's lots of options out there, and biking is just one of them.
Right. And I think it's just a wise decision to kind of look at what the options are, and maybe biking isn't going to be good for you, but taking the bus would be, or ride sharing, or getting a more efficient vehicle, or there's more than one way of improving your sustainability when you travel.
Yeah, and if it is biking that you are interested in, I do have a fact sheet on that. Biking as an alternative mode of transportation, and it's through USU Extension as well, that lists all the health benefits that you can reap, and with the scientific backing to those. There's a research study that was done at Oregon State University linking different modes of commuting with happiness, and biking was the number one linked to happiness. And can you guess what was
happy? I love that.
Can you guess what was the lowest on that scale of all the different types of commute?
Probably those driving in their car for a long time.
Single driver commuters, yeah.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So I will post all the links to the fact sheets that Roslynn is mentioning here in the comments, so that if you're interested, you can go check those out. Because you mentioned one was shopping at farmers markets, and then the cycling one as well.
Yeah, so the shopping at farmers markets relates to the local food movement, and that's what the fact sheet is called.
That's right, local food. So how can we make changes in our home? What are some simple changes we can make at home to be more sustainable? Yeah,
one thing that I love to do in my home, and Moab, the community is really good for this. People love doing potlucks or different social events at their homes. And so one thing that I do is host a ladies' clothing swap. You could also do a co-ed clothing swap if you wish. But it's fun when it's just your friends that come over and you can try things on right there in the living room. So that's why I generally just do a ladies' clothing swap. But people bring clothes they don't want, and usually I organize it so the shirts go on the table, the pants go on the couch, and everyone just creates their piles. We socialize. I provide some snacks, and then eventually, inevitably, someone will start rooting through the stuff, and then everyone goes in and starts looking, and everyone leaves with great items of clothes that's new to them, but also gets rid of the clothes they don't want. And then if I'm hosting, I'll take all of the stuff that's left, and there's usually quite a bit left over at the end, and bring that to a thrift store and donate that. And
I love that.
That's something fun to do in the home. And The other big hitter I can't miss is energy, like I mentioned, of the big three of our carbon footprint, as it's called. And you can search for a carbon calculator online and see what your footprint is and find ways to reduce that. But it's energy. And a lot of people don't realize that in the state of Utah, when you have appliances plugged in, it's pulling primarily from fossil fuels. And so it has a big footprint associated with it. And so our home, we built, like I said, we actually live in a straw bale home in the walking, biking only communities. And we have solar panels on top of our home, and our home is designed with 100% electric. We didn't run any gas line. And we actually overproduce. We feed the grid, and I called Rocky Mountain Power to see what that means. And they said it's a direct offset of the fossil fuel portion of the grid when people are over energy and feeding it into the grid. So solar is a really great thing if you can afford it. That's a bigger investment. You know, that's not an easy step for a lot of people. But I will say that my monthly energy bill, and because I don't have a gas line, my total energy is $8.87, and that's my hookup to the grid. And wow. That's really nice. And also, definitely an easy thing is unplug your appliances when you're not using them. People don't realize. So
when you say appliances, what do you mean, like your toaster?
Yeah. So my laptop's a great example. My laptop's plugged in right now because it's charging, but when it's done charging, it'll show a little green light on the charger, and that little green light is what's called vampire electronic, which means it's still sucking electricity when it's closed and not in use. And so that's one appliance example. If your TV, when it's plugged in, has a light that's shining, then that's another vampire electronic. You can unplug that. Those are great examples of things to unplug when you're not using them.
Would it work to turn off, like a surge protector will often have a button that you can turn off and on. Would it work to just turn that button off?
Yeah, that's a great way to even make it more simpler. You just turn the switch on your surge protector. So that's another thing. Of course, if you're replacing appliances, look for Energy Star. Those are really energy efficient. And then also replacing light bulbs with LEDs. So those are really much more energy efficient than our typical light bulbs. And so I always recommend those. We're getting away from CFL bulbs. The ones that were really popular for a while, they usually were looking in white because they contain mercury. So it's actually, if you look at the whole life cycle of a product, those light bulbs weren't that great for the environment when we were done using them.
Right, and that's a really interesting idea. I heard a phrase when I was in school, the greenest building is the one that's already built. Have you ever heard that phrase?
Yeah.
So while it can be really great to upgrade, make those changes with something new that's more efficient, sometimes in the overall scheme of things, it's more sustainable to keep something you already have. And I don't know how to gauge which is better. Do you have any advice on that when you're trying to decide?
It really depends on the product. So, of course, it depends whether or not your old product is recyclable or if it can be broken down and the materials reused in some manner. If you're landfilling it, then, that will change the picture, of course. And it also depends on how much more energy efficient is the product you're purchasing versus the one you're getting rid of. And so it really is a case-by-case basis, and that one involves a little bit of research.
Right.
But yeah, I would say too, when it comes to materials and things in the household, this is getting a little ways away from energy, but I'm a working mom, so of course busy mom, and my husband works full time as well. And but things that we found really simple to do, we don't own a clothesline, so all of our laundry goes on, or we don't own a dryer. The clothesline is our dryer. And so in the desert, generally it takes about half an hour to 45 minutes for clothes to dry outside, and at least in southern Utah for us. And so all of our clothes get dried on the clothesline, but we also, with River, our son, used cloth diapers and cloth wipes, and so we had none of the waste stream that way when he was using diapers, and that was really a great way to reduce our footprint. It doesn't work for everyone, but it worked fine for us. And I'll switch back for a second to to energy and say one thing. If you are building a house, a lot of people don't think about this, but the way you orient your house is super important. So you want to really take advantage of that southern side of your house and bring in that light in the winter and that warmth. But in the summer, your roof overhang should be enough that you're actually blocking that summer sun from entering your house. It's called passive solar design. Super important when you're building a house. And we did that with our house, of course, when we built that. And so, yeah, thinking about the way you're building, the energy of your house, and the products you're using in your house. And I use as many reusable products as possible, trying to get away from our throwaway mindset.
Right. And it sounds like what you're encouraging is just to be mindful, like having a consciousness about it instead of just the consume, and throw away everything. Like, be more thoughtful in what we're doing.
Yeah, and that thoughtfulness can really start to shift our relationship with our environment and make us feel better as well. Instead of living life like a parasite on this planet, let's actually think about our daily behaviors, which ones are energy drains, which ones are environmental drains. How can we shift that paradigm of our daily life into one where we have a more mutualistic relationship with our environment, or ideally a regenerative relationship? We're actually helping to heal ourselves and our surrounding environment for our daily behaviors.
Right. So let's kind of try and wrap up a little bit. We talked about the gratitude as a motivation, and you've mentioned some of the benefits, like you mentioned some benefits of cycling instead of single person commuting in a car. Tell us more about the benefits we can expect to see when we make these kinds of simple changes to live more sustainably.
Well, of course, we're coming full circle now back to that gain versus loss. There's actually solid evidence that sustainable living correlates with happiness. And there's a great study that I cite from Society for Human Ecology, and it's in that journal, and it's called Happiness is a Correlate of Sustainable Behavior. And it was with over 600 individuals, and they found a very strong correlation of living a sustainable lifestyle, and that includes frugality, altruistic actions, so various angles, ecological mindset with into this construct of sustainability, and that was strongly correlated with happiness. And the authors, and perhaps I'll finish with this, they ended with this beautiful part in their journal article that says, one implication of these results is the practice of pro-ecological, altruistic, equitable, and perhaps frugal behaviors promotes an enhanced level of happiness. However, if this effect is found, why do some people not practice sustainable behaviors? One possible answer is because they do not know about this positive consequence, that it actually does relate to increased happiness in our lives. There's also an alternative explanation to the correlation between happiness and sustainable behavior. This is really neat, I thought. Happiness positively influences sustainable acting. So what that means is that it's a two-way relationship, right? So it's a feedback loop where if we're engaging in sustainable behaviors, we're more happy. If we're more happy, we're more likely to increase engaging in sustainable behaviors. And so one more possible explanation is that the causal flow between these two psychological factors is bidirectional. And so I just mentioned that. And a further interesting explanation is that when people break out of the conditioned habits of consumption, competition, and inequity practices, this is liberating. Individuals take greater control over their lives, understanding they can make conscious choices that contribute to their own well-being, the well-being of others, and the natural environment. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea that instead of, exactly what you said at the beginning, instead of thinking of it as a sacrifice, like it can be a little bit selfish. We can do it a little bit for ourselves. For our own happiness and for the, preserving this world for future generations. And I mean, I think it's multifaceted. It's not just a selfish action, but there needs to be
some of that, though, because you're more likely to engage in it, right? If you want to squeeze in physical activity in your day and you want to, and maybe you view that as selfish, but that's your way of getting to work then. That's how you make that happen. Or for me, I really I liked this white button-up shirt, for example, and I bought it at a thrift store, and so it was someone else's shirt, and now I'm using it, and I'll donate it again when I'm done with it. So it has a full cycle that actually involves no landfilling. And so those are examples of things that they're helpful to me as an individual. They make me feel good, but they also decrease my environmental footprint, or at least have a neutral environmental footprint, and increase my relationship with myself and the environment.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea. Well, Roslynn, thank you so much for sharing some of your, not just your research, but your personal experience on how to make these sustainable changes in our lives a little easier and simplify it a little bit. I hope that I'm definitely planning to make a few changes, especially with Earth Day coming up, and I'm really excited to talk with my kids about this and hopefully do some kind of retraining and make that change so that as we have these future generations that they are not repeating some of the same destructive or throwaway society actions that I grew up with. So I appreciate that so much.
Of course, yeah.
And any final words? Here's a question. Where can we learn more about sustainability and the work that you're doing with Extension?
So all of my fact sheets and other sustainability fact sheets are posted on my website, which is USU Extension Sustainability. So you can just Google search that, and that's where you can find a whole lot of information. We have a social media platform as well of Twitter, Facebook, blog, Pinterest. So all of that's called USU Extension Sustainability, and you can just easily search that. And I'd say just daily life, think through your big three hitters: transport, energy, and food. And every day is Earth Day, and we can do this.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. We'd appreciate it if you would like and share this video. Maybe post in the comments how you plan to make some simple changes in your life to live more sustainably. I will post all of the links that Roslynn mentioned in the comments, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Marta.